you all for this international webinar on the changing nature of India-China relations during COVID-19, organized by Department of Political Science and IQAC, BNN College, Bhiwandi. I'd like to call upon Professor Ravindranath Rasal, HOD, Political Science Department, to share a few words about a college and institute. Rasal, sir.
Good afternoon.
Sir, एक minute. TP Singh sir from BHU wants to join. I think we need to allow him in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Professor TP Singh. Yeah.
Yes, we start?
Yeah.
Good afternoon. I am Professor Ravindranath Rasal from Padma Shri Anna Sahib Jadhav Bharatiya Samaj Unnati Mandal, BNN College, Bhiwandi, District, Department of Political Science. I welcome all dignitary and participants to today's international webinar. The changing nature of the India-China relations during COVID-19, organized by Department of Political Science, IQAC, BNN College, Bhiwandi. Our institution was established in 1948. Our institution founder president, Padma Shri Anna Sahib Jadhav, is an ex-Rajya Sabha member. Our institution is 73 years old. And our Bhiwandi is 54 years old. Our college is A grade back 2016. And our college, best college, awarded by Mumbai University. Our institution president Sri Vijay Jadhav and executive president Sri B.D. Kale, and our principal AD1 and IT coordinator Dr. S.R. Muhammad, my colleague, Department of Political Science, and teaching and non-teaching staff here in College Bhiwandi. I thank to today's program organizer, Dr. Kruzun Mile. He is a professor, Department of Politics and Politics, University, and he is the coordinator, Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar, Social Justice Center, University of. And I thank to today's chief guest and chief speakers to all and all.
Thank you, sir. Now I request Shivale sir to show a brief video clip by Honorable Sri Balkrishna Kale sir, who is the Executive President of Padma Shri Anna Sahib Jadhav Samaj Unnati Mandal.
To address this web conference by the department and India. As the Executive President of Padma Shri Anna Sahib Jadhav Bharatiya Samaj Unnati Mandal, and on behalf of the management of college, I wish all the delegates a very interactive conference. I express all my good wishes for this web conference. Stay home and stay safe. Thank you.
After this caring message of stay home, stay safe, now I request our Principal Dr. Ashok Wagh to say a few words.
Good afternoon, delegates. I welcome you all on the occasion of this web conference on the changing nature of relations during COVID-19, which is organized by the Department of Political Science and the IQAC BNN College Bhiwandi. I feel much privileged to state that more than 10,000 pursuing higher education around the Bhiwandi Taluka. The college is re-accredited by NAC with A grade, supported by DST fees grant for chemistry and zoology. The management of the college is striving for excellence to bring to light the dream of the founder president Padma Shri Anna Sahib Jadhav. We are now the best college award recipient from the University of Mumbai. The Department of Political Science is the active department in the college which is actively involved in organizing such type of international conferences which are helpful to the student as well as helpful to the researcher and the academicians. This web conference is the outcome of the continuous efforts of Professor Rasa, the head department of political science, and his team, his colleague Sri Mayuresh Deshpande, as well as the IT specialist Mr. Pramod Chevale and Kuldeep Rathod, assistant professor of Department of Accountancy and Commerce Department. I wish this intellectual a bright and fruitful avenue in research as well as academic for the academicians across the country. All the very best. I also give the special thanks to Dr. Mrudul Nile, who have been actively involved in organize this web conference. So I special thanks for him and all the very best for this event. Thank you very much. And over to Mr. M. Deshpande.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, I would like to call upon Dr. Shashikant Malunkar, IQAC coordinator, to talk about the initiative taken by IQAC of our college. Malunkar, sir.
Good afternoon, delegates. It's indeed a privilege to say a few words on this occasion of International Web Conference being organized by the Department of Political Science of BNN College, Bhiwandi. The department is very vibrant politically because the members of the department, actually the fraternity, is actively involved in practicing political activities. For instance, Professor Rasal has been a member, active member of Congress. Professor Rasal has been a Senate member as well, as we all know, which is an honor for the department as well as for the college. This college and the Department of Political Science has produced a number of municipal councillors, MLAs, MPs and ministers who contributed in national and state administration. So I think this topic is very much relevant today. I must thank Dr. Mrudul Nile for willingly using and allowing BNN College to use this platform to vocalize our ideas and make the use of BNN's platform to gather all the dignitaries and galaxies of speakers on this occasion. Today, on the occasion of this COVID-19, the entire world has come to a standstill position, wherein everything is standstill, the economy, business, industries, and human relations as well. The cultures are changing. We are keeping physical distances. This virtual conference is the very example of this, that we are distancing ourselves. So the very first change which I find here in Indo-China relationship during COVID-19 is distancing human beings from one another, distancing nations, distancing business, distancing money. Everything is going away from us. I must thank the Department of Political Science and Professor Ravindranath Rasal, whose efforts have brought this conference to the platform of BNN College. I thank all the dignitaries. I thank all the speakers and the galaxy of speakers. I especially thank Dr. Mrudul Nile for using BNN College as the platform for this web conference. I hope this conference will definitely highlight certain such avenues that will definitely help the upcoming researchers and students to look into this matter from a different and changed perspective, changed lens. I wish a very all the best for the conference, being the coordinator of IQAC, and I thank the coordinators for allowing me to say a few words on this occasion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now we have Dr. Mridul with us. He has extensive biodata, but because of limitation of time, I am giving brief information about him. He's working as a coordinator for Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Center for Social Justice, University of Mumbai. He worked as Director of Student Welfare in University of Mumbai. And sir is working as Professor in Department of Political Science, University of Mumbai. Now I call upon Dr. Mridul sir and request him to introduce our guest and coordinate the further session.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. At the outset, I would like to thank Principal Wagh sir for for having organized this particular webinar in his college. Secondly, Rasal sir came with an proposal to have something on China, and I thought, there are two best scholars in the country, and probably whatever is coming in the on TV channels, people are being misled. I thought whatever the authentic picture of China is, that should come in front of us, and therefore this particular webinar. I also thank all the organizers, Maulkar sir, Rasal sir, and all those who have contributed to organize this particular webinar. I'm very happy to announce my very dear friend Dr. Jabin Jacob, who has a extensive experience in knowing China both from in and out. Currently, he's associate professor in the Department of International Relations and Governance Studies at the Shiv Nadar University, Greater Noida, and an adjunct fellow at the National Maritime Foundation, New Delhi. Though he has given me a very short bio, he is a co-editor of new volume that is entitled China's Search for National Regeneration, Domestic and Foreign Policies under Xi Jinping, released by the Palgrave Macmillan last month. And Jabin is presently working on a new book on India's China policy making. He had a very long stay with the Institute of Chinese Studies, which is a think tank that is actually financed by or sponsored by the Government of India under Ministry of External Affairs, and he has number of trips to China, knowing China, what China is. So I thought, amidst all these the kind of news that we generally see on regional channels, why not to have some very authentic source coming in and talking to us? From that point of view, I thought Dr. Jabin Jacob and Dr. Arvind Yellary would be the best one to speak on these particular subjects. Apart from that, there are three more speakers. One is Renu Rana, who is currently in China doing a postdoctoral studies. We have Sadia Rahman, who has completed her MPhil from the University of Mumbai and currently pursuing her doctoral studies in Taiwan, and Sumed Lokhande, who is a student of both. Jabin sir is a co-guide for Sumed. He's working under me, and I thought one of the experts should be there to guide his thesis, and that's how Jabin sir is a co-guide to his thesis. He had stayed in China for almost 3 years and worked on China, currently pursuing a joint PhD between University of Mumbai and Chinan University, China. So before we begin with everything, I think I would request Jabin Jacob to open the debate in a form of a keynote, or is trying to get in, but she's not able to, come in. I think they say that the this thing is full. Okay, so if you could just allow her, them are trying, they've been messaging. So over to Jabin sir.
Thank you, Mridul. Can I just check if the video is coming through?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, all right. So I just wanted to confirm that and the audio is clear. All right. Let me start by thanking BNN College for this invitation. Professor Ashok Wag, the principal, Professor Russell, who's been coordinating last couple of days, faculty and students at BNN College, as well as the different faculty from around Maharashtra, and I also see that there is somebody from Assam who's come in. So my thanks to all of you for joining in on what I think is a very important topic. My thanks also to Mridul. And Mridul, if I might just request you once more to please send the announcement that the audios from others should be muted right now, because I'm hearing a lot of disturbance. I just request, because now with COVID, as the previous speaker was just saying, that we have now gotten used to this webinar mode, and we see how an online teaching, and we see what the mistakes are made, and we try to avoid those mistakes. Simple rules like switching off the audio or switching off the video when you are not speaking, those are very helpful. As I was saying, Mridul, thank you for sort of organizing this as well, thinking of me to speak to you. And it's good to see my fellow panelists who I haven't seen for a very long time, that I'm happy to see them at least on video format. Let me just say this, that people like me who are located in Delhi, we often go for seminars and conferences in Delhi, and we are talking to the same set of people all the time. And so I particularly appreciate this opportunity that is coming from Maharashtra to engage with a very different audience. Mridul mentioned that there were some misconceptions, often active misguiding of the general public in India on matters related to India-China relations, especially the current COVID pandemic, as well as the current situation on the boundary. So I will, in my address, try and touch upon all these issues very briefly, but I hope clearly. So let me just start very quickly with a common idea that people seem to have, whether the COVID virus was released by some Chinese lab, whether it was deliberately released, and so on. I would just like to start off by saying that as of now, the scientific evidence is to the contrary, that we do not have any proof that this was actually artificially created, despite what the Americans might be saying. And I think in this age of social media, of this online interactions, we have to be extremely careful about fake news and false propaganda, not just from outside India, but also inside India. So that's one thing. But yes, there should be no question, no doubt that the fact that the pandemic reached the stage that the virus spread out of China is entirely the fault of the Chinese government. It is entirely the result of a particular kind of governing system that the Chinese have. And we in India, who have of late, of many years now, been looking at China with great deal of envy, should be extremely careful not to fall into the trap of trying to imitate China in trying to get to the same level of development that we think that they have achieved. Because that development comes with a lot of costs. And some of the costs is things like this, where even doctors are saying, hey, listen, there is a strange kind of virus around. We must be careful. We should maybe shut down things. We should be looking into it a bit more closely. And the doctors are not listened to by the government. The government just shuts down information, punishes the doctors actually who are making this, who are warning the government about this virus. And then, what happens, it spreads around the world, and different countries have different capacities to deal with it. So that's one thing about COVID itself. The other thing is, in terms of a general background, remember that this is the 70th year of the establishment of diplomatic ties between India and China. And, at the usually what happens is there's a whole year of planning that goes into what all the two countries should be doing in the 70th year. And as we see now from the situation on the LAC, this entire 70th year of relations is actually the truth of the matter of the relationship is that there is a great mistrust between the two sides, and that there are many, many areas of unresolved tensions between the two sides. On the surface, the political leaderships on both sides have always tried to give the impression that things are okay between the two countries. Whether in India or in China, it doesn't matter which government in India it is, it's both governments. Whatever the political party at the center, they've always tried to give this impression. But the reality is always shown as that this is quite different. The Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping had a very good meeting in Gujarat when President Xi came visiting in 2014, and Prime Minister Modi went to China in 2015. But 2 years later, we had the Doklam incident in Bhutan. Then after Doklam, we made the big mistake, and this is my point of view, we made the big mistake of going for these informal summits at Wuhan and Mamallapuram. But despite all of those informal summits, we had the tensions on the LAC, and for the first time in several decades, we've had soldiers dying on the LAC, as we saw on the night of June 15th at Galwan. So I think now the Indian public cannot be fooled anymore. That the tensions between India and China cannot simply be wished away, cannot be ignored. That the government, as well as analysts like me, we have a duty to explain the situation much more clearly to the general public. So let me get to the point about what is happening on the LAC right now. What is the state of military ties? Now, there should be no doubt, yes, the Chinese have intruded into Indian territory across what we perceive as a line of actual control between the two sides, right? I think there should also be no doubt that the Chinese are presently sitting in areas which until April of this year, India controlled, right? It is a fact that the Chinese, wherever they're sitting in Ladakh, they're sitting on Indian territory because Aksai Chin is supposed to be Indian territory. But apart from that, post end of April, May 20, and as of May 2020 this year, the status quo has certainly changed. There has been mixed messages from the government. Government message is not very clear about what is happening, but for good reasons, because obviously the government doesn't want to get political criticism for what is happening on the boundary. But this is not something new. Even in 59 to 62, Prime Minister Nehru was also under public pressure to react in some way to the Chinese aggression that had been going on from 1959. So what we need to consider here is that we have to not look at just the immediate situation, but we need to look at the larger situation. Yes, the Chinese are sitting on some parts of Indian territory that we controlled before April 2020, but what is it that they're gaining out of it? All right, those are tactical gains. All right, if we want, believe me, the Indian Army is quite capable of going in some other area where we are strong and capturing territory where the Chinese used to control before. But the question is, what is the larger strategic goal that we are achieving? Or what is the larger strategic goal that the Chinese have achieved from this particular exercise? And when you look at it that way, I think this particular incident or these tensions on the LAC have been an opportunity for us to do many things with respect to China policy that we were not doing before. I think this mistake of informal summits will be finished by now. No government in a democratic country should be engaging with an authoritarian state in an informal summit where the general public in a democratic country, that is people like us, do not know what is going on between the two leaders. That sort of lack of transparency in governments in a democratic country is unacceptable. And it arises, this whole plan of informal summit, or that if I talk personally to Xi Jinping, I can achieve something, comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of the Chinese political system. The Chinese political system is one that is geared to undermining democratic governments in every other country in the world. It was about promoting the Chinese model of government and system across the world. So I think that is the first point that Prime Minister Modi should have kept in mind, or anybody should keep in mind when you interact with an authoritarian state like China. Even the Americans made this mistake for several decades. They thought that if we open up to China, if we engage economically with China, China will turn democratic. That's not happening. The Chinese are not interested, the Chinese Communist Party is not interested in turning democratic. The Chinese people might be, but the Chinese Communist Party that rules the government, the country there, is not interested. They are interested in keeping the Communist Party in power. All right? So that is the fundamental understanding that we need about dealing with China and about what we can expect in relations with China. So the LAC problems have allowed us to, target Chinese FDI, to target Chinese apps, which have their own problems in terms of security, in terms of data security, in terms of privacy, and in terms of their ability to commercialize information that you and I have without our knowledge. If you and I are giving away our personal data to an app on the phone, it would be best that it is an Indian company that is able to make the most of it. But today we give away this information very freely to Facebook, to TikTok, to WeChat, and none of these are Indian companies. So it is not India that benefits from this. So I think it's a good decision, in my view, to ban these apps and see if India can come up with alternatives on its own. Even now we are using Google, which is an American company, or we use Microsoft Teams, which is again an American company. And do not be fooled by the fact that these companies might have CEOs who are of Indian origin, but they are American citizens. So what can we do that is of India in India, right? Now, in terms of military ties, I said that the army is very well capable of taking care of things, but it needs the instruction from above to do it. But more than that, we also have to understand that the army's capacity to fight a war, a two-front war, is limited. Our civil-military relations are in such a bad state that our army's reforms are so they are lacking in reforms that we are not able to fight a war for more than 10 days. So after 10 days, what will we do? So all of these things have to be taken into account before we say, hey, we have to capture our territory back. We have to look at it at a much larger perspective. Now, but despite all these problems, we have tried over the last decade and more, 15, 20 years, we've raised 2 mountain divisions. We've raised a strike corps that is aimed specifically at China. We've opened airfields very close to the border with China. We have built multiple roads. This entire road that the Chinese were threatening in Galwan, the DSDBO road, that was being built over the last 15 years. So all of these things we've been doing to improve our capacity to protect our interests on the LAC. One thing that is missing from the debate is how we should be looking at the Indian Ocean as a way of countering Chinese presence. I think we need to pay more attention to the Indian Navy. And it's particularly important that I am talking to a largely Maharashtrian audience. Maharashtra history shows that you are not just, the Marathas were not just great armies, but they also had a great navy. And this maritime focus in India's approach to the military sphere, to foreign policy, to the outside world needs to be re-emphasized. You are all sitting in Mumbai, and Mumbai is the headquarters of the Western Naval Command. And you need to see how the Navy can be put to use where the Army might not be strong. The next, I'd like to talk very quickly about the state of the boundary dispute. The boundary dispute the negotiations have been going on since at least 1980. In December 2019, we just had the 22nd meeting of the special representatives between the two sides on the boundary talks. Now, these talks have been going on for a very long time without much result because, there is a lack of political willingness on both sides to make the final decision. The final decision, whether you like it or not, will be that the map of India will change. The map of China will change. And 2 strong leaders in India and China, Xi Jinping in China, Prime Minister Modi here in India, need to be able to convince their people that any sustainable solution to the boundary dispute will require us to give up some claims and and for the Chinese to give up some claims. So it'll have to be a compromise. But because both are such nationalists, they also are afraid perhaps to make such a decision, and they are willing to wait for a better time, so-called better time, to make to see whether we can achieve everything that we want. But that looks extremely unlikely. So in the meantime, you will continue to have problems on the LAC. We will continue to see now. I would say there is a new normal. We will continue to see tensions on the Chinese, on the line of actual control with China. Not quite like the line of control with Pakistan, but we will probably see more such tensions, physical fights, perhaps even a few casualties in the years ahead. And we will need to do something about it because these are two large countries that have a lot to do with each other. Now, I'm not one of those who argue that all economic relations need to be cut. I think we need to be engaged in those relations that are useful to us. And my colleague Dr. Arvind Yellary will, I'm surely, talk more about this. Finally, I want to talk about the broad political relationship. What has been going on in India-China relations until now? I think you've all heard of China's Belt and Road Initiative. This has been a way of developing infrastructure in countries around China, further afield, even in Africa, Latin America. And China is using its strength, which is the capacity for infrastructure development, to tell countries, look, hey, we can offer you something that other countries can't. But in South Asia, China has also used the BRI to increase its political influence. So the BRI is not just an infrastructure development program, it is a larger strategic program to increase Chinese influence around the world and to undermine, like I said before, the influence of democracies around. So if China is increasing influence in South Asia, I would say it also is aiming not at a non-zero-sum game, it is also aiming at reducing India's influence. So we see what are the tensions with Nepal, for example, recently. China-Pakistan relations have anyway been good, so therefore India-Pakistan relations are also not good. Though I cannot, I think one thing we have to be very clear is that we cannot keep blaming China for all our problems in South Asia. We need to be able to fix relations with our neighbors. If our relations with our neighbors are not good, then China will take advantage. Simple thing. So they will raise the issue of Kashmir in the UN Security Council. They will not sanction Pakistani-based terrorists in the UN Security Council and so on. But obviously, we are also not sitting by and not doing anything. We are also improving our relationship with the United States, with Japan, with Vietnam. We are developing the Quad, where Japan, the United States, and the Australians are coming together to work more closely in the Indian Ocean. So we are also doing things. But ultimately, remember, in international relations, we cannot depend on any other country. If tomorrow we go to a war with Pakistan or with China, no other country is going to come to our assistance. So we need to do what we need to be able to do in order to achieve our goals, hopefully without fighting, but primarily try and improve the economic conditions in our countries so that we can stand on our own feet without depending on other countries. Today, if you look, we talk about the strength of our army, but all our military supplies come from outside the country. We do not produce all of our requirements at home. It comes from Russia, or it comes from the United States. The Chinese produce all of their weapons, practically 90% of their weapons, on their own. So, we have to think about all that when we talk about, hey, we are ready for fighting with the Chinese or the Americans. We need to be able to develop our own R&D in this country, innovate, develop our own apps so that we can communicate with each other without depending on our data being stolen or located in servers in foreign countries, the United States or China. So I think these are the sort of things that we need to keep in mind. Now, finally, by way of conclusion, as was just mentioned by, I think it was Professor Malunkar, that, COVID has changed our the way we interact. And I think this is an opportunity because the dominance of Delhi, I think, is now reduced. When everybody is interacting via online media, I can speak with Bombay, Bombay can speak with Delhi, everybody is on an equal platform. And I think those of you students who are from different parts of Maharashtra or different parts of the country who are watching this should be bold enough, should be brave enough to put your views out there, to do these online courses, to attend online meetings like this, and inform yourself, equip yourselves. And I would also like to congratulate BNN College again for organizing this, taking the initiative for this. And I think from a point of view of India-China relations, fundamentally, we need to understand more about China. We should leave aside our stereotypes, our envy, our anger, and try to understand China from a very sober, dispassionate way. We cannot get emotional about this. We need to be able to understand where our weaknesses are, where our strengths are. We need to be able to understand where China's weaknesses are, where China's strengths are, and work accordingly. Both COVID-19 as well as the tension on the LAC have led, I think, will lead to a new stage in India-China relations. And all of us are in a position to shape that new stage in India-China relations. I will stop with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jabin. As always, it's one of the wonderful lectures that I could hear after a long time. There are a few questions actually that are raised. One is our own friend Chandramohan Joshi. He says a very large number of Chinese soldiers are now present in Indian territory. We have learned from PM Modi that he is unhappy with the CDS Rawat and commander of
Cases of those, what is not confirmed. If the Prime Minister is unhappy, the Prime Minister has a way to go about it. He can discuss CDS, but obviously he will give a bad signal in terms of, okay, that there will be CDS. And sometimes it's not appropriate to talk about these things right now when when the action is actually ongoing. So I think that needs to be kept in mind. We cannot really work on the basis of speculation. Right? Now, it's about whether the Chinese are in Indian territory. Again, these are numbers. Like I pointed out, we cannot really judge from this very limited window. There's a lot of disturbance. So I don't think we should judge by just the very limited window of these last few weeks what's been happening. We have to see, okay, where are we going with this in the longer run? Of course, we need clarity about what's going on. And unfortunately, the government has not been very clear about it, and that is a failing of the government. But it's not only this government that has been, that's done this. Previous governments have also done this. There's a tendency for government to always think that the people need to be kept at an arm's length. And unfortunately, this is the state of affairs in a democracy like India. About intelligence failure, again, I think it's too soon to assess. I think the intelligence was available. We had some problems because of COVID that troops were not immediately put in their locations in time and so on. Perhaps, the Chinese took advantage of it. But I would say this was waiting to happen. My own reading is that a bunch of local situations soon escalated. But the Chinese had prepared for such a situation. After Doklam, in any case, they were very, very clear that something like this was going to happen. And I've been saying it since 2017 that something like this would happen on the LAC, that we cannot assume that the problem in Doklam is resolved, that the situation on the LAC would change. In fact, if you remember, during Doklam itself at Pangong So in Ladakh, there was a big fight between Indian and Chinese troops, which many of you would have seen on your WhatsApp videos. So the nature of the engagement had already changed between India and China. These things would have happened somehow or the other. And the Chinese had exercised, I'm sure, had planned for this, that when something happened, this is what we do. And which is why we saw the action of the movement of Chinese troops and Chinese infrastructure to the area very quickly. Now, the other thing about exercising the naval, we should be exercising with the Americans for sure, but not just Sri Lanka, Maldives, and Bangladesh. But the situation with Bangladesh is interesting. The Bangladeshis are buying submarines from the Chinese, which means that the Chinese will come into the Bay of Bengal because they have to train the Bangladeshis to use the submarines and so on. So we have already sort of missed a trick there. But remember, our most important maritime neighbors are actually Indonesia and Thailand. People tend to forget that Indonesia and Thailand are our neighbors. The Andaman Sea is shared by Thailand and Indonesia on one side and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands on the other. So we should actually be looking at exercising more with these navies Thailand is actually an ally or a very close partner of the United States, and the Indonesians are the largest country in Southeast Asia. So who also have a territorial dispute with the Chinese. So Indonesia is a link that we need to be able to use. We need to have much closer relations with Indonesia. And we all talk about better relations with our neighbors, but how many of you actually speak Bengali or Nepali or Bhasa Indonesia or or Thai? So unless we are able to do all of that, we cannot actually have a better relationship with our neighbors as well. We need to be able to break the ice using their language, their culture. Finally, the question about 74% FDI in defense. FDI, the percentage allows you control. And so if you have 74% FDI by a foreign company, then we have to be very careful that it is not all of one company, that the controlling stake is still held by an Indian company. And ultimately, it is not really a problem of FDI as much as our inability to create competition within the Indian system for better output. We only have one DRDO. We only have one HAL. In China, there would be many, many DRDOs. They are all competing with each other. So if one fails, the other might succeed. In China, there are at least two HALs. So two companies at the same time will create a jet, will fight to create a jet. So if one fails, the other will succeed. But here, it's a monopoly by government companies. And monopolies will never work. What we need to do is probably not just bring in foreign investment, but also change the incentive structure in India for better R&D, for more competition, and therefore better some development of these things. But all of this under international law. So we have to be, there are rules about how to go about it, and rules of war which say that prohibits the use of these things. But once war starts, we don't know. And more than bioweapons, I think we should be much more worried about cyber security. Every day, the Chinese launch thousands of cyber attacks all around the world on information facilities of all their adversaries. I mean, for all you know, the Chinese might be listening on this particular conversation. So how do you ensure your data is secure? The Indian Army, the Indian Armed Forces, the Indian security agents have all been attacked by Chinese cybersecurity warriors, as they say. They have a strategic support force which is devoted to this aspect of war by non-kinetic means, war through cyber measures. We also have this. We are also doing the same thing, but I suppose we need to get better at it. And today, those of you who think that I can study political science and that's enough, I don't think that's good enough. I think political scientists also need to understand science and technology, need to understand cyber issues. I, for example, teach a course on science, technology, and international relations at my university, and this is something that I got an interest in because I see what the Chinese are doing, how the Chinese are using technology in BRI, technology in their foreign policy. You see how the Chinese have banned Twitter and Facebook, but their diplomats will use Twitter and Facebook to deal with other countries. So that sort of aspect to international relations, to politics, is something that we need to pay very close attention to as political scientists, as social scientists. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. I mean, there are some more questions that are coming in, but then we'll take some of these questions in the end. Now may I request Sadia Rahman, who is a doctoral scholar in, one second, I'm really sorry for the name. Name of our university. One sec. I'm extremely sorry for that, because I have to coordinate certain other things also.
It's Chongqing, Sadia, or you can.
Yeah, Chongqing. Yeah, Chongqing
National University. Sir. Yeah, Chongqing.
Chongqing National University. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you. To tell a brief about Sadia. Sadia is a student of Presidency, Kolkata. Followed by that, she came to University of Mumbai. Sadia is one person who has really shown her, tremendous potential while she was doing her MPhil. She had also been to Taiwan on a language course, which again, for this to a great extent, Jabin sir was responsible. In fact, I can say that this is the even Sumed and Sadia, both of them are product of Javeen sir. So, and now they're doing their doctoral programs. So now over to Sadia. Sadia, you can begin with your presentation.
Yeah,
I'm going to
you.
talk on India-China relations with a Taiwanese perspective.
Thank you so much, sir. Firstly, I would like to start by saying thank you for having me on this webinar. It's a great opportunity, and I'm overwhelmed sharing the space with such distinguished guests right now. So I will be having a PPT presentation. So just give me a few minutes and I will set my PPT to share it. Sir, is it visible?
Yes, it is visible. Yeah.
So just a confirmation. Is it visible, sir? And am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible. Okay. It is visible.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So thank you so much again. And I would be talking on India-China border tension. I know Javeen sir has given an excellent introduction. He has already spoken a lot about it. But taking a cue from that, I will present something on India-China border tensions from a Taiwanese perspective. And I will present my arguments stating why I said that India-Taiwan should have strengthened bilateral relationship or have a robust bilateral relationship. So with this coming recent clash which happened between India and China, this to me is a very significant development. Why I say this? Because it's some kind of a new activism which has been traced on the border areas between India and China. And when I was doing my own research and I was trying to find out some simplified maps to have a better understanding for the audience, I came across this map from South China Morning Post, which clearly gives a very simple picture to have an understanding that if you see the red dotted border areas, it claims that this territory, which is known as the Aksai Chin, is controlled by China, but this area is claimed by India. Further on, if you see the green border areas, this demarcation is controlled by India, but this is claimed by China. If you see the three black spots, tentatively, if you say it looks like a virus or something, this shows that the three hotspots where the clash happened at the Galwan area, the hot spring of the Gogra area, and the Pangong So Lake. Significantly, when you see the line, red line, that demarcates the line of actual control. So when I was actually trying to put my own observations on territorial dispute between India and China, I was looking for a suitable word to describe this phenomena. And I thought that using a common word won't be suitable. So I don't say that India-China border tension is a common phenomena, but I definitely not say that it is not a new phenomena. And when I talk about this, I would like to say that I will not discuss so much historical roots about it, but it's very, for me, it's important to mention certain historical points to talk about this territorial dispute and connect to the recent clash of this, which happened between India and China. So this clash which happened between India and China has historical connotations. Many scholars talks, it dates back to around 1914 between India and Tibet when McMahon Line came into existence. But there are many other scholars who say that it has historical roots in 1860s when a British cartographer, William Johnson, he issued certain maps. So where the dispute which happened between India and China, the recent one is based on this map issued by William Johnson, and the discrepancy, if you can see, independent India much relied on this version of map, whereas China was not vocal about so much about the development happening about this map. So in the 1950s, when independent India was not concerned about the maps or the border areas, you saw that suddenly China has started building up infrastructure at these particular areas. So though India was not so much conscious about this, China has already started its own infrastructural building, and it was prepared for it. And while this came as a shock to India, so when you study the border dispute, you understand that since the inception of CCP in 1949, China has been involved in territorial dispute with around 23 territorial disputes, out of which 6 are currently active. And when I show you this map, you understand the red bordering areas are the current territorial dispute which China has. And if you see a small island nation on nearby Senkaku Island, this is Taiwan. Currently also China has territorial disputes with Taiwan. If you talk about independent India, and if you see this map clearly tells you that independent India has already resolved its border issues with Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. Rest other border issues are still prevalent with India, with its neighboring regions. So, study the India-China border relations. You often hear the term LAC, line of actual control. The connotation of this term has been explained by Professor Jabin, but I would just like to reiterate, it's such a concept that both countries have their own perception of their own territory. So here lies the discrepancy, or if I can say the friction between two countries. And the border area is extremely complex between India and China. It is divided between 3 sectors: Western, Middle, and the Eastern sectors. Western and the Eastern sector are the most vulnerable areas at the border areas. And generally, the LAC is considered as a gray zone area just because of their own perceptions and just strategic location. This current intrusion which China did on the Indian territory was to just a strategic advantage over India. So what is different about the current clash which happened between India and China, irrespective of the past clashes which has happened in 2013 or 2017? I know there are talks that China has been using this pandemic time to get over its own territories. It's using its traditional tactics, etc., etc. But we need to look at the other side of the scenario as well, since both are developed. China is already a developed country, and India is also developing. So the infrastructural building was definitely happening at this particular places. So this itself talks a lot about the creation of conflict of interest between the two countries. So sooner or later, because of the infrastructural happening at this region, conflict was supposed to happen. And it is not the one last time that India has faced this. In future, there are many more such things or conflicts will happen in future. So this clash was different. Why? Because this clash, since 1955, we saw fatalities for the first time, and without being any shots of fire or something was witnessed. So from the strategic point of view, if I could say, PLA intruded the Indian territory, and this building structures, military installations, and bunkers. And I would also like to quote here Ajay Shukla, defense analyst. He was the person who actually was giving some information that Chinese have intruded Indian territory around 1.5 kilometer. It is very significant to also quote another Indian officer here, Dipendra Hooda Singh, who actually gave a very interesting argument in one of his interviews, saying that this Galwan clash is a very striking variation. It's a complete disregard of existing protocols and agreements. So it actually questions the existence of the CBMs and the agreements which is present between both the countries. And strategically, as I mentioned earlier, since India was constructing the SDBO road, so this intrusion was to actually take advantageous position at this particular DSDBO road. What I perceive here from the recent clash, I see this as a trust deficit in India-China relationship. Though it is a well-known fact that this India-China relationship is already an adversarial relationship. There is already escalation of tensions between these two countries. So what relationship both these two countries used to share, it has made a more deeper dent in this particular relationship. It has questioned the existence of the bilateral relationship because China has intruded the Indian territory at the LAC. China tried to change the status quo. And when you see with the existence of so many protocols, 1993, 1996 agreements were signed. And in 2003, we had established special representative meetings. All these CBMs are still in existence. Still we saw fatalities happening at the border area. These CBMs have actually proven futile between both these countries. And when you talk about the statecraft, you have to understand that India faced an aggressor which is much more superior. China is much more superior, and both have different statecrafts. China deals aggressively; it has a more aggressive stance. It wants to change the status quo, redefine the status quo, whereas India still relies on the status quo. It wants to maintain the status quo. It still depends on the multilateral and bilateral mechanisms. So when you talk about of these two countries also, there exists a discrepancy. China is not only dictating regionally, it also wants to dictate internationally. So this assertive diplomatic strategy of China, it's on a broader scale, it is using coercion just to attain fait accompli. And what I mean by this is it takes a two-step forward and negotiate and take one step backwards. So this is what has happened at the Galwan clash as well. It intruded from finger 4 to finger 8. And then it started negotiating, trying to redefine the status quo. And I would like to also quote here National Security Advisor Shiv Shankar Menon. He, in one of his interviews, he said that though China was trying to redefine the status quo, it is very important for India to get back to the status quo ante. And this behavior of China is very alarming in the sense because he cited certain data that in the past 35 years, China has pushed for fait accompli. 50% of those fait accompli aspects have become permanent. So from that aspect, it's a worrisome situation for India. So I would like to talk about the appeasement policy of India. India is well known that it has a giant neighbor, superior in all terms, and it has every now and then face border disputes. So its buffer zone at the western sector and on the eastern sector is shrinking. On the other hand, you engage with China and China gets back to you and treats you with encroachment. So the very nature of the Chinese strategy is deception. It conceals, and this nature is backed by its own official leaders, which takes the military saying that the military preemption was taken as a defensive measure. So I would like to question here that why India has such a naive vision towards China when you know that China is superior in all forms. It is a revisionist power. It is challenging the status quo. Why India does not have a strategic vision in its foreign policy, a more clearer notion or an idea about towards China. India has time and again relied on appeasement, which is, if I could state certain as instances, 2014, Modi came into power and it was declared that Modi Shi was declared. During the same time, PLA intruded at Ladakh's territory at Chumar area. The summit was declared a success, but then PLA did not step back until Indian military fortifications were demolished. So, and then when you take another example, India government delisted China as the country of concern. Why was that so? Then you see the Doklam incident happening, followed with the 2 informal summits between Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping. These appeasement policy does not work. India needs to understand that China engages politically, but it also follows with a containment strategy. And to understand China's behavior, I would like to quote here an American scholar, Andrew Scobell. He has studied China's behavior from the cult of defense point of view. And he mentions that China is actually influenced from 2 strands with this behavior. He talks about the Confucius stance, which makes China very conflict averse and very conflict averse, but there is also a prevalence of real politics in its behavior, so which is offensive. So it's highly a prevalence of both these stands, the Confucius and realpolitik, which he defines as cult of defense, and this will actually lead China in going ahead with military operations to fulfill its own nationalist agenda. So definitely it's on the path of expansionism, and China intimidates not only India. It is not only a concern for the Indo-Pacific countries, it is also intimidating Taiwan. Taiwan has been getting recent intrusions in its airspace by China, so it's a worrisome factor for Taiwan as well. From the recent standoff, what lesson Taiwan can learn from this is it's a fact that China claims sovereignty over Taiwan, and it puts all its diplomatic pressure, its own to isolate Taiwan internationally, to intimidate Taiwan internationally. But what is interesting to note here that this is one of the quotes from a first communique in 1972, where China actually says that all nations, big or small, it should be equal. Big nations should not bully, and strong nations should not bully the weak ones. China will never be a superpower, and it opposes the hegemony. But this, when you see this word, when you compare this word at recent times, you understand that these words are so shallow, and it's contradictory in terms of Chinese current behavior. It is intimidating Taiwan. It is intimidating India. The cross-strait relations between has deteriorated since 2016 because the DPP, which is the ruling party of Taiwan, does not align or does not toe with China's line of one country, two system, or it does not want unification. It wants to maintain the status quo. And when you see the situation of Hong Kong, it's really going to political upheaval, China's grip. So for Taiwan, it's a very worrisome situation. It sees India's border situation, Hong Kong. It sees its own intrusion in its own airspace. So it needs to understand China's strategic and tactical maneuvering, and it should not rely on a rule-based order or any kind of protocols and agreements, because China has no respect for that, as we see what's happening in South China Sea, what's happening in Nepal, encroachment of China, or in India. So it needs to have a very self-defined strategic framework for itself, and it needs to actually make itself more visible in the multilateral institutions. If I talk about Quad, it should have, it should maintain, or it should make itself visible in the Quad and maintain informal relations with countries which Taiwan understands of global influence, which is the US, Australia, the EU, and India. So when I talk about the lessons which China talks, which Taiwan should take from India-China border standoff, it should also it seeks towards India to actually strengthen bilateral relationship between both the two countries. And here I present my argument that why India should strengthen its bilateral relationship with Taiwan. Firstly, because you can argue that Taiwan is a small nation. Why is that such a nation important? But the reliable partner which India lacks, that Taiwan fills that vacuum, fills that space. It's a reliable partner in a very comprehensive way, in economic way, security wise, in other areas as well. And Taiwan has its policy, which is known as the New Southbound policy, in which it wants its relationship between 10 ASEAN countries and South Asian countries. In terms of South Asian countries, look up to India to strengthen the bilateral relationship. But the unfortunate situation is that it's because of the ambiguousness and the lack of vision that this bilateral relationship cannot thrive or is not thriving. And I would like to quote here another scholar, Fan Tianzi. He mentioned that though there are ongoing funded projects happening between the two countries, but the potential of the bilateral relations have still not been achieved. So this needs to be done. The potentiality needs to be reached. When Taiwan is actually lending its hand and to strengthen bilateral relationship, India should reciprocate back in a more clearer vision and not in an ambiguous manner to strengthen bilateral relationship. Taiwan has categorize certain sectors to strengthen bilateral relationship, not only with ASEAN countries, with South Asia, which includes agriculture, education, health sector, etc. So I just wanted to show one picture which talks about one country, one center projects. This is the health sector, which Taiwan has targeted these specified countries, and it wants to have a robust relationship in the health sector. It has identified hospitals, it provides medical equipment and advanced training in terms of hospitals. So to have a robust bilateral relationship in terms of health sector. So it is not only the health sector or the education which should be a focus. It's a natural fit that India-Taiwan should have relations in terms of security as well, because both countries have same security. Both countries are dealing with the same country, which concerns security interest, that is China. So it is not about having a military alliance. I'm not talking about that, but having a defense cooperation between the two countries will obviously enhance or strengthen the bilateral relationship. When I say the defense cooperation, I mean that the exchange of military informations and other aspects, because Taiwan is the country which understands China much better and it is capable to pass on informations to India. And I do not see that any reason that India should shy away from not building a robust relationship, a bilateral relationship with Taiwan, because if you talk about defense cooperation, the US already has a military attaché in Taiwan. Japan also has it. So I don't see India should shy away from building any kind of bilateral relationship with Taiwan, be it economic, be it defense cooperation, be it in the education sector. And when I say that building a robust relationship is important, there's always a factor that how will it happen. Of course, it is important to bypass all the circumspection in this bilateral relationship. Much has been said when you talk about the India-Taiwan relationship, that strengthening of people-to-people proposition always comes up. I do not deny this proposition, but I personally feel right now that it is time to craft policies and implement those policies. It is now high time to have a vision towards each other and not an ambiguous approach towards each other. The very nature of India-Taiwan relationship that has plagued the relationship is the idea of option. This optionality needs to be changed, and it needs to have a more pragmatic approach towards each other. And when I say pragmatism, we often hear the term that Taiwan uses, that India is a partner which has a sizable market. But this confusion or this problem always comes up that India, it's difficult to do business in India. We have always heard such kind of problems from the Taiwanese side, but I personally feel that these problems are not non-solvable problems. It can happen if Taiwan knows which person to tap on, which resources to tap on, etc. And from the Indian side, we always see the Indian side oscillating between China and Taiwan, and maintaining an approach that it does not want to angry China, but here and using Taiwan as a trump card against China. But I would like to argue here that it's important to shed that mindset and see Taiwan not as a trump card, but as an independent tie for India. And they should actually have a vision and craft policies to strengthen the robust bilateral relationship between both the countries. I personally feel that more consultative space should be set up and more dialogue should happen between the two countries to have a strengthened bilateral relationship, and then only the relationship can thrive. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sadia. Thank you very much. And this new perspective again becomes very important. Whatever the relationship between China and Taiwan is, and how we can build on relationship with Taiwan. This brings in a very different kind of an approach altogether. Thank you so much. Now, may I welcome our next speaker, Sumed Lokhande. Sumed Lokhande is a doctoral scholar with the University of Mumbai. In fact, he's almost done with his thesis, and he should be submitting any moment. Dr. Jabin Jacob happens to be his co-guide. He is, though he enrolled in the University of Mumbai, but major work of his thesis has been done in two universities, basically in the Shanghai University, and second one is Jinan University. So now over to Sumed. Sumed will be talking on riddles in Indo-China relations. Sumed?
Hello?
Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just this morning found a issue with my laptop that microphone is not connected. So what I do have a PPT presentation that I will show on my laptop, but I will and I guess that's working right now perfectly. Okay. So let me just share my screen. Can you see the screen?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
So I would initially like to thank the organizers of this webinar, Dr. Rasal sir, and all the committee members of BNN College. I'd like to thank Dr. Mudrumya.
Sumed, you're not clear. Sumed, you're not clear. Okay, be a bit louder also and clear.
Now I'm clear?
Yeah, now it's better.
Okay. So I would also like to thank Dr. Mudrumya, my guide, my mentor, for giving me this opportunity to present my views on the current India-China relations. I would also like to thank my co-guide and mentor, Dr. Jabin Jacob, to share this podium with me, as well as my mentor, Dr. Arvind Yelve, to share this podium with me. Whatever I have learned from China, or about China, or of China, these two people that I am sharing my podium with them have a major role to play with it. Now, coming to my topic, that is riddles with Indo-China relations. As we all know that a relationship is complex, and as we share the same neighborhood, similar compulsions and similar self-perceptions, we are bound to compete directly and also over the neighborhood. If I have to explain India-China relationship in a nutshell, what I can say is it's a very fragile transactional partnership based on the fundamentals of reciprocity and circumstances which guides their courses of action towards each other. Further, these circumstances are not permanent. They are always changing. If today India and China are cooperating in Sector A and competing in Sector B, there is high possibility that few years down the line, they may compete in Sector A and cooperate in Sector B. India-China relations should be understood with a holistic approach, as most of the aspects of their ties are interconnected and generally have an impact on each other. If something positive or negative happens in one sector of India-China relations, it has its effects on the other sectors. In other words, the relationship is a chain of reactionary measures which are taken according to the development at bilateral, regional, or multilateral levels. Though they have tried to revive and improve their relations since the 1980s, certain issues have played as riddle in their relations which have made it so complex and unpredictable. This presentation tries to shed light on these riddles in their relationship, boundary disputes, uneven bilateral trade, and the third one is their ambitions to be a global power. So when we come to boundary dispute, we have to understand that the war that happened in 1962 and the war and the clash that happened recently are two different things. If in the 19th century there were many British cartographers who went to demarcate the boundary between the British India and Tibet, and they made multiple lines, precisely two lines, that is the Johnson and MacDonald, are been recognized or were been published in the 20th century. So the 1962 war took place because India preferred the Johnson line, which put most of the sites in India's part, whereas China referred that the early line that was proposed to them was the MacDonald line, and they refused to accept that. The talks didn't work, and then we saw the war of 1962. This war had immense ramifications on the psyche of both the countries. A wounded India felt cheated as by its friend, whereas China felt that by teaching India a lesson, it had made a point that no one will try to bully China unnecessarily. Now, when we talk about LSE, there is a difference in them. We see its first mention in a letter sent by Chow Enlai to Nehru, dated on 7th November 1959, in which he said that LSE consists of McMahon in the eastern sector and up to the line till which each country exercised control in the western sector. It got a legal status after the 1993 Agreement of Maintenance of Peace and Tranquility along the LSE. It is loosely the line beyond which Chinese retreated after the 1962 unilateral ceasefire. However, this line has also been troubled with disputes. There are around some 23 areas of differences on the LSE where India and China claims overlap, where India says it lies in the east inside Chinese territory and Chinese side says it is in the west inside Indian territories. We have made almost 5 agreements in 1993, 1996, 2005, 2012, 2013 to manage these borders. However, still, those agreements, those protocols, those understanding didn't stop those the recent intrusions, Chinese intrusions. Now, why this happened? There is a big reason, or rather a big chronology behind it. Before going to the chronology, I would like to make a point over here is that since the Doklam, we have heard some of our politicians and even army personnel claiming India is prepared for a 2.5 war. 2.5 war being first is Pakistan, second China, and third is the militia, the Naxalwadi movement going on inside India. If we were really, my point here is, if we were really prepared for a 2.5 war, we should have had designated troops patrolling these areas with all the firepower kept at standby to defend these areas. However, this was not the case. When China initiated escalations on the borders and the intrusions became public somewhere in the May, most of our soldiers from the Pakistan frontier were shifted to the eastern borders. We went out to seek speedy delivery of Rafale aircraft from France and asked Russia to rush delivery of S-400 air defense system and other security contracts, which shows that we were not really prepared for this. Now, coming back to the chronology that led to the current situation is, on 5th August 2019, our Home Minister, Amit Shah, introduced President's Ordinance in Rajya Sabha abrogating Article 370. Same day, a bill to bifurcate Jammu and Kashmir was brought and passed in Rajya Sabha.
Next day, it was passed in Lok Sabha. However, during a debate, when provoked by a Congress MP, Amit Shah said, "When I speak of Jammu and Kashmir, also include POK and Aksai chain in it." Though this definitely was a masterstroke, and by bifurcating the state, help us to divide our boundary with Pakistan and China. However, this statement raised few eyebrows in Beijing. On 11th August, S. Jaishankar, our External Affairs Minister, visited China for a pre-planned program and assured the Chinese that abrogation of Article 370 doesn't change the status quo on LSE. However, the damage was already done. The Chinese were not fully convinced. On 15th August, we see China asking to close their UNSC meeting. On 16th August, the Kashmir issue was discussed and nothing concrete came out of it. In mid-September, Indian Army conducted massive live-fire exercise in the eastern Ladakh bordering China. In October, Xi Jinping visited India for the Mamallapuram summit. Now, one thing that was not published in Indian newspapers, like other issue, was the Chinese spoke about a trilateral cooperation between India, China, and Pakistan, which India rejected right away. In January again, China tried to raise the Kashmir issue in United Nations again to no avail. In late January, a Prime Minister during his speech said that India could defeat Pakistan in around 10 days. Now this panicked Islamabad and again raised few eyebrows in Beijing. Later we saw India ratcheting its claim of POK and Gilgit-Baltistan. And if we would have looked at the Chinese movement or what Chinese would think, this decisions in May or the end of April were a pre-planned response to the escalations or the moves that India was doing since August. Now what we learn from this is that the ministers and politicians should be more responsible during public speaking, and especially the ruling party should understand that they are no more in opposition and in power for the last 6 years. Their words and statements will have repercussions. Or if we have to speak and give big statement, we shall be prepared for repercussions like the current one, so we are not caught in a situation like this. We should bring in more covertness while speaking on matters related to our international and security relations. What has happened in India, that the things that should have secretness or secretive are in open, and the things that should be open or in open place are kept secretive. Now, take a look at China. It claims sovereignty over South China Sea since 1960s. However, it upped the ante only in 2009. And in 2010, it officially declared that CSC, that is South China Sea, is a core issue at par with Tibet and Taiwan and non-negotiable when it became a 5 to 6 trillion economy. Further, it launched BRI initiative in 2013 when its economy was around 10 trillion US dollars, which means that when Chinese take an initiative or frame a policy, they have a planning and financial backing to fund and support it. So why I'm making this point, I will come back to you later when I will speak about the third riddle, that is ambitions of India and China to be superpower or global power. So if I have to conclude on boundary disputes, it is not going to be resolved anytime soon. The Chinese are adamant with their stand, and they don't feel like resolving the issue as they are a much bigger economy than India. They're just buying their time, as they feel that the more gap between Indian and Chinese economy will give them more bargaining power there on the negotiation table. Now, let's look at the second riddle, that is uneven bilateral trade. Now, I don't deny the fact that China is responsible for this, but India shares the equal blame for this. Now, why I say this, let me explain you in a few minutes. In early 2000, China was known as an imitator, a country producing cheap replicas of Western plants. However, today it has become an emerging hub for innovative manufacturing as it has developed a robust manufacturing ecosystem and has huge investment sectors to back those innovations. What India lack here is the industrial manufacturing capacity. 99% of India's import from China are related to industries. Today, if an Indian low-wage earner can buy a Chinese mobile at an affordable price, a middle-class Indian person can buy a large smartphone HD TV like Xiaomi, which has features equivalent to Samsung or Sony, or a rich Indian industrialist can buy affordable Chinese machineries and components of good quality, which helps him reduce the cost of its production. All this has happened not only because China can provide this good, but also because Indian governments and Indian manufacturing industry are unable to give an alternative. If Indian companies cannot compete with Chinese companies in Indian market, how does one expect them to compete in Chinese markets? Today, India is suffering from a dichotomy. On the one hand, it wishes to reduce the trade deficit with China, but on the other hand, it does not have an alternative for good quality industrial products with competitive pricing, be it mobile or any other consumer sector. What I want to say here is, blocking trade with China is going to harm us more than do anything good for us. Because the things, if we don't buy from China, we don't produce in India, we are going to buy from any third country, and the prices are going to be high, and we are going to suffer. But yes, there are some sectors where, like 5G, AI, and other data, so software, where we should restrict Chinese companies, whether we have problem with China, we have good relations with China or bad relations with China. But there are some sectors, for example, renewable energy, infrastructure, railway building, where China has an upper hand or has a good technology that we can utilize in helping or benefiting India. So now what India should do right now? What we should do is, we have to understand the Chinese logic behind their development. The Chinese development came with a lot of sacrifice and a lot of rational thinking. Think about it. If Japan would have decided not to trade with USA after the Second World War, would it have been this successful? If China would have decided not to trade with USA in the 80s, would it have been this successful? I guess not. Hence, trade should go on. What we should do is, India wants to improve its trade balance with China. It should bring in manufacturing, it should support manufacturing, it should develop its logistics. And it should stop looking at China as a whole and try to make fractions and divisions of the Chinese market, region-wise, industry-wise, need-wise, and then try to target those regional markets and industries India can compete or has a potential to compete with Chinese goods or the countries from which China imports. Now let me come to the third riddle. That is the global power ambitions.
Sumit, be a quick,
Yes,
be a bit fast, okay?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's very small. One thing we should accept that India has always shown a big brother attitude towards smaller neighboring states. Earlier, they didn't have an option. However, in the last 20 years, China has emerged as an able competitor to India, undermining its influence. India did learn from its mistake as Prime Minister Narendra Modi revived the Look East policy into Act East policy. He also initiated Neighborhood First policy. We also have forums like Mekong-Ganga Cooperation, Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multilateral Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, and many other forums. But what we lack is funding and finance to make these happen. Hence, At the moment, what India should do is, India has two options. Either to be a balancing power between USA and China while protecting its interest in the region, or to follow Deng's policy of hide your strength and bide your time, by sticking to non-alignment, dealing with them separately, and come out stronger once we become an eighth economy, which will have a more bargaining power than we have now at the negotiation tables with China. Said this, I would like to end my presentation and would once again like to thank the organizations for giving me this opportunity to express my views and my point of view on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumit. Thank you so much. Okay, your three riddles, they certainly teach us a lot how to engage with China. Now I would request Dr. Renu Rana to present her paper. Dr. Renu Rana holds a PhD in international politics, specializing in the domain of international regimes and non-proliferation studies. She earned a doctorate under the supervision of an esteemed Professor Sheng Deli from the School of International Politics and Public Affairs, Fudan University. Renu also received the Dean's Award for Academic Excellence in 2020 and the Outstanding International Student in China Award 2018 during her doctorate research in Fudan University. Her academic credentials were recognized and awarded by China Scholarship Council, China, Ministry of Education China, Ministry of Human Resource and Development India, among others. She was a graduate fellow studying nuclear policy at KitSat in Daejeon, South Korea in 2017. Previously, Renu completed her MPhil in Chinese Studies from Delhi University. Her professional credit, Renu has presented her research papers in a number of international workshops and conferences in Kazakhstan, South Korea, Hong Kong, Japan, and many other countries. Renu's research has been published in reputed peer-reviewed international journals, and she continues to write and comment on national and international forums and media. She also taught two courses, that is, a regional scenario, Asia-Pacific, and Introduction of International Relations at Fudan University. With her expertise and field experience, she delves into areas of international security, international regimes, nuclear non-proliferation, NPT, disarmament, Asia and regionalism, China's foreign policy, India-China relations, and South Asia. So she is one of the foremost scholar currently residing and working in China. I request Renu to talk on her paper. Thank you. And in the end, we should take up all the questions.
Thank you, Professor Mridul. Please let me know if I'm audible.
Yeah, you are very much.
Okay. So I would like to thank BNN College first for inviting me for this conference, and also thanks to all the patrons and the organizing committee for inviting me, and also my hi to all the eminent speakers who have been speaking for last couple of hours. So today I will be focusing on India-China relations in the post-COVID-19 emerging world order. So I would first like to talk about the context. So here I'm trying to compare the pre-COVID-19 and the post-COVID-19 and how the world order is reshaping, if at all it is, and how the changes in the world order may impact India-China relations bilaterally, regionally, as well as globally. So if you all remember, China in the recent decades has been sticking with using emerging power status at most of the international regimes, despite the tremendous economic development. At the global institutions, China has been playing a very balancing role. However, we have come across many voices from the West as well as within India about China's assertive foreign policy vis-a-vis its sovereignty claims in recent times, especially in the last 2 to 3 months. The recent assertiveness on China's part in last few months makes one question if China is not concerned about the image of a responsible state, which it has been focusing on for quite a number of decades. Has China become over-ambitious or overconfident? how COVID-19 pushed the international relations into vacuum. So we have to look at a couple of aspects when we are analyzing India-China relationship at the international level. So here I will be taking into consideration the role of the nation states. That's why I mentioned how China's foreign policy is going through changes. Also the role of international systems, how the international global order is changing, and also the importance of international accountability. That's why I mentioned about the status of responsible state. So based on these three aspects, I want to state that international regimes continue to be questioned, and that is not just happening now after like COVID-19. It has been happening for quite a number of decades, be it NPT or NSG, for their lack of inclusivity and inherent biases against developing countries, and power politics within the very structure and processes of various institutions. So why post COVID-19 pandemic is very significant here, because I argue that this pandemic will be a watershed moment in this defining or reshaping the world order. So these questions and observations I just made, they further unfold the complexities reflected in the world order. So why I mentioned about this world order, changing world order, the changes in the world order, in the context of what is happening at the border between India and China, I want to raise a question: do bilateral ups and downs or inconsistencies in India-China relations reflect or define how China and India get along at the regional global level? Are there some sort of relationship there? So one needs to see how India and China relations work along these architectures of global world order, or to be very particular, international regimes. For instance, UN. UN is a very larger architecture. It deliberates on the matters of peace and security. So that's why it's very important for us to reflect upon the world order. So how India and China in particular come together to deal with a couple of issues which are raised from time to time at different international institutions. So when we're talking about the changes in the international world order, I want to talk about the continuities which have been there since last 2 decades, not necessarily just after pandemic. So we have seen that especially last 1 decade, has seen many changes highlighting the global world order, and changes have been very, very prominent. Some of these changes are global revival of nationalism. There is also protectionist sentiments emerging. There is the globalization forces emerging. Then there is an increasing lack of faith in multilateralism. There is international governance seems to be in crisis, as argued by many scholars all over the world. So when we talk about the global revival of nationalism, we all have come across how what is happening in the US, from election of Donald Trump to Brexit, nationalist policies of Japanese PM, and also in India also that is very much prominent and evident, as we can see. The same sort of sentiments we have come across in Europe also, when it comes to Italy or Germany or Austria, for example, in 2017 and 19 during the elections. When we talk about deglobalization forces, we already know what is happening between US and China. So the US-China trade war is already going on. We have seen that the US tariffs have already reached the highest stage since 1993. So these globalization forces are already accelerating due to post-COVID-19. If you look at the WTO data recently, according to WTO, COVID-19 could cause global trade to fall by as much as 1/3. When we look at UN Conference on Trade and Development, we see there's a prediction of reduction of flows of FDI, foreign development investment, by as much as foreign direct investment as much as by 40%. Also, international civil aviation organizations has projected a drop in international air passenger traffic. So this reflects the strengthening of deglobalization forces across the world. And we also have seen increasing lack of faith in multilateralism. One of the examples I would like to cite here is WHO, World Health Organization. Many international institutions have been questioned in recent times. There are a couple of reasons for that. Most of these multilateral intergovernmental organizations have become increasingly fragmented due to power politics, and they have been politicized, are struggling to find relevance. we have seen recently how US has cited the institutional weaknesses within WHO. There's also the rise of political populism across the world has also sort of tried to highlight these weaknesses in these institutions of late. One instance I would like to give here is the Republican Senator Joe Hawley. He also called WTO to be abolished. And this is not just coming from US. There are other voices coming from different parts of the world other than US. The international organizations somehow, like for instance, UN Security Council, G7, G20, have not really been able to do much recently, despite this emergence of pandemic. We have seen the cut in the funding of the UN from US. If you look at the Refugee Agency of UN, if you look at the peacekeeping budget of UN, we have seen there's a cut from the US. Also, at the international level, we have seen the escalation of great power rivalries between major powers in the world, between US and China, for instance. Also, the world order, the global governance, I have observed that there's a possibility that COVID-19 pandemic could cause or accelerate a decline in the US-led international order. So what does it mean for us? Why it is important as an Indian, especially when it comes to India-China relationship? There are a couple of possibilities which we can look into when it comes to reshaping of international order. That could be the role of China in the international world order. So we have seen people are talking that as US is already struggling in tackling pandemic domestically, so will it reflect upon the lack of trust among other members of the world and their lack of trust in US as a leading power? So will it be replaced by China? But at the same time, we have seen China has been questioned. Chinese accountability, Chinese transparency and international institution, in particular WHO, has been questioned. However, China has been insisting on strengthening the global governance institutions. So we need to keep in mind how China fares at global governance level. So I want to next talk about how these changes in the international order will impact India-China relationship bilaterally, regionally, as well as globally. I believe that there's a lot of scope for cooperation for both the countries. There's a lot of scope because we already have seen that India and China have a lot to talk about at global governance level. There has been a lack of cooperation for a very, very long time, despite being members of many, many institutions together, be it BRICS, be it AIIB, NDB. These are the new institutions, these are new regional and the international institutions, in addition to the Bretton Woods institutions, which have been existing for a very long time. So there was a debate in last 1 decade that Asia will be the new leader of the world, will be the new leading forces, will be the new leading force at the international level. But will it be, especially after pandemic COVID-19? So I see, despite many differences, both bilaterally as well as globally, bilaterally I'm basically referring to the border issue in recent times, both India and China emphasize upon the principles of multilateralism from time to time, also non-interference in domestic policies of other countries as a basis for cooperation at international regime level. So that is the similarities they share, and that is the basis of their cooperation at global governance. Also, another similarity in their goals at the global level has been their quest to reform global governance institutions to reflect new balances of power. They all talk about making these global institutions more multilateral, more participative, and more inclusive, especially they insist on the participation of the developing countries. Both the countries have done it, at least in principle, on paper. When we look at the issues, like when I focus on issue-specific themes, I will say they broadly agree on matters relating to international economic system, energy security, and environment. However, we must note, despite having these similar principles, similar aims when it comes to economic development, we have seen that both the countries, these two countries, have competing priorities and often different trajectories to seemingly similar quests in the international level. Some of the examples I would like to highlight here are NPT. First is NPT, Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It's a major umbrella most important treaty when it comes to non-proliferation of nuclear arms. But we have seen that both the countries, though they focus on non-proliferation all over the world, there has been different trajectory on both the countries' aims and how they deal with this institution in particular. For example, China has been more rigid since it joined NPT in 1992. And it is not okay with India joining the NPT as a nuclear weapon state. India for long has insisted on being part of NPT as a nuclear weapon state. But if you look at the principal document of NPT signed in 1962, which came into practice in 1970, as per the document, any country which has developed its nuclear weapons after 1968 is not eligible to be nuclear weapon state. So NPT in principle divides the countries into haves and have-nots. So have-nots are the countries which don't have nuclear weapons. So India still is a country, it's not counted as an NWS, nuclear weapon state, despite having the nuclear weapons, because it developed its nuclear weapons in 1998 and 1999. So there's a sort of debate between these two countries. China has not been very supportive of India's joining of NPT as NWS. The similar things we have seen at NSG. NSG is the nuclear supply group. China has been insisting that India has to be part of NPT and it has to join NPT as an NNWS, non-nuclear weapon state, which India cannot, because India looks for more parity at international organizations. However, China is not okay with it, and China is not allowing India to join NSG. Another different trajectory we have seen at UNSC, despite China claiming that the global governance institutions should be reformed and should be made more exclusive, it has not really okayed India's inclusion in UN Security Council as permanent member. The same is happening with Japan's claim for permanent membership. So there are definitely, despite having the same quest for multilateralism and inclusiveness of international institutions, both have different trajectories, and it is, or it may be, due to their different national interests. So, and these competing priorities have been not only a non-proliferation system or just UNSC, it has also reflected in Asian security, regional stability in Southern Asia, and also when it comes to security in the maritime commons, space and cyberspace. Both the countries have diverging priorities and conflicting interests. So I argue that COVID-19 will actually accelerate these differences further, especially in the light of recent border dispute between two countries. And India and China, though there's a lot of scope for cooperation, because there is a lack of cooperation at the international level. There is a lot of scope for cooperation, but I'm afraid it may not really happen, and especially due to COVID-19, we can see these differences may impede the development of meaningful partnership between the two at the global level. So when I talk about how India may proceed further to cooperate with China at the global level, as well as deal with it bilaterally. So I would argue that India is already engaging with other countries in the Indo-Pacific bilaterally and through Quad Plus regionally. Quad Plus actually include the countries from Quad Plus, Vietnam, New Zealand, and South Korea. So it is another mechanism of India's engagement at global level, demonstrating its changing priorities and trajectories. And it is also keep on insisting to balance China's future influence institutions like WHO. And India has continued seeking a cooperative approach by reaching out to the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, that is SAARC. And recently, New Delhi also proposed an emergency COVID-19 fund with its initial contribution of $10 million. India has been participating in G20. There's a recent example that happened in March that India, despite COVID-19, has participated in the G20 virtual meeting. India has also emphasized the importance to strengthen reforms and to reform the international organizations. However, there's a big question here. Delhi's ability to respond to this competition for influence at the international level, it will largely depend on how India ultimately fares in this pandemic crisis. at all levels in health, economic, and social terms. So to conclude, I argue that it is definitely difficult to see how the post-COVID-19 world order will be shaped or formed for that matter. However, it is also very evident that pandemic has underlined the existing transitions in the global order and the weakening of international institutions. I would like to argue that current developments demonstrate the need to strengthen the underlying foundations of the global governance architecture. There's a lot of scope for both the countries to cooperate further. However, before they do it, there is a need to address the issues they face bilaterally, also to see how they can still come together despite having different trajectories or conflicting interests. So that's all.
Thank you, Dr. Renu. I mean, of course, a very interesting and brilliant presentation that you brought in a lot of issues of global governance. You brought in issues of WTO, you brought in issues of border, and what is the way forward. And you seem to be very optimistic on all of these lines, except unless and until we are able to, work on our trust deficit that we have between both the countries. Now, before we go on to the valedictory session, I would like to call Dr. Chandra Mohan Joshi because he has a lot of questions in the chat box. So if Dr. Chandra Mohan Joshi can come forward and he can ask his questions to whoever speakers that he wants to.
Oh, okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mridul sir. Am I audible?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, my first question is to Ms. Rana. Congratulations, it was a well-constructed presentation. Ma'am, whether US remains the dominant player or China replaces it, I think we need to have a very, very strong global the governance architecture. So my question is, what is the way forward to strengthen global institutions, which you have already said that there is some kind of trust deficit in multilateral institutions across the world. And my second question is to Sumedh. We have a huge trade deficit with China. As you have mentioned it, that our manufacturing capacity vis-a-vis China or any other major economy is relatively poor. So we lack in terms of productivity, efficiency, and we also do not have very strong manufacturing capacity. Now, given this, how can we have a strategy where we want to ban almost all Chinese goods and Chinese investment, and at the same time we also want to have a surplus on trade account that with China? Okay, and with respect to that, the first one speaker, I think Sadia. As sir had also put in the earlier one, Jabin sir, that the cult personalities meeting, informal meeting between Modi and Xi Jinping, will India have to pay a huge price in future if there is no transparency in between that kind of meetings? So what could be the lesson that we should learn for future? Thank you, sir.
We'll take up all the questions together, and then maybe those who have their own questions they can answer at one go, so that so that we already are running short of time. Yeah, I mean, can I have Shraddha to ask her questions, and followed by that Pragya. Pragya and Shraddha are students of public policy in the University of Mumbai. Yeah. Shraddha?
So she's written there's some problem with her mic.
Sure. All right, Pragya, you can go ahead. Pragya, you can go ahead. I'll take the question later on. Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My question is for Jabin sir. So, Sino-Russian relations are popping up like never before. Could this have ramifications on India, considering we historically have had engagements with Russia, and also with US, considering that there is electoral interference and the ongoing US-Russia war? Second part of the question would be that also Russia is taking a passive war with Western nations and therefore looking for a friend in China.
Sorry, I didn't get the last part, the second part of the question, Pragya.
So the second part is that also is Russia waging a passive war with Western nations and therefore looking for a friend in China?
Okay, thank you. Mridul, maybe the other should go first.
Okay, all right, no problem. Yeah. Sadia? Sadia, can you?
Hello, sir. Am I audible? Hello?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So the question for me was regarding the transparency in the informal meetings, right? As far as I got it correctly, the person who asked me
the personality cult, yeah.
Yeah, but sir, what I was trying to portray from my presentation, it was more of the appeasement. So why the presence of appeasement in Indians leaders or Indian policy is such that we just appease towards China, or to have maybe we have this sort of understanding that if we have such appeasement policy, China will have a very subtle neighbor, or we'll have a subtle relationship with China, and China won't be that aggressive. So my point was to harp on that and to mention that, and how I actually do not mention or say much about the informal meeting or the kind of personality cult or the presence or the prevalence of transparency in such meetings, because I question the prevalence of such meeting itself. The meeting does not did no good for the betterment of this bilateral relationship. So whether or not transparency is there or not, the very nature of the meeting puts into question that why India has only an appeasement towards China and not a strategic framework to deal towards with China. That's it. Yeah.
Sure, thank you. I mean, and I guess immediately after the meeting itself, Doklam, you should do
Yeah.
Doklam, right? Yeah, fine.
Doklam was 2017, sir. This meeting was 2018 and 19.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Now, I think, Sumit, there was some question for you.
Okay. The question for me was about can India ban the entire Chinese goods and try to produce here, or try to supply, or try to be a manufacturing surplus country. So at this moment, sir, it's not possible. Further, India is a signatory to World Trade Organization, and as Jabin sir rightly said, we are few of the countries who follow international law. So we can't ban all Chinese trade right away. So we will have to do trade with China, whether we emotionally you like it or not. But yes, there are some sectors, as I said in my presentation, the Huawei, the 5G, or the software, or AI, artificial intelligence, where we should restrict Chinese or even any other company from USA or other countries who can get data of our citizens and produce them in India. And secondly, as I said, that we need manufacturing reforms at the most, and quick manufacturing reforms where we could produce the things that can be produced in India. For example, take about the drugs or the medicine industry. India is one of the largest medicine industry, but the raw material comes from China. However, till 2003, India used to produce its own raw material, but after that, it stopped producing it because producing raw material for those medicines in India became much more expensive than importing it from China, and hence we started importing it from China, and almost 90% of our 70 to 80% of our raw material for medicine comes from China. So these are some things, some areas that we have to study, look upon, where we can produce at home and protect our areas and protect our interests over here. Secondly, if we see iron, that is, we export iron to China and we import steel from China. So if we have iron ore, that is the raw material, why don't we produce steel here in India? In January, when it was asked to some industrialists why do they do so, they say that don't get the same quality over here. So India will have to invest on that quality and compete with China, at least in India first, rather than compete in China and the world. First, we should compete China in Indian markets, and then we will think about the world. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Now over to Dr. Renu Rana. But if Renu Rana can also take up this particular question of Shraddha Boite, where she says that for the first time, China is claiming territory in Bhutan's eastern district of Thrashing. Although it does not share boundary with it, what could be the reason behind the claim with respect to Arunachal and Doklam issue?
Thank you, Professor Mridul. Thank you for the questions. I would like to first answer a question by Professor Joshi. Thank you for your question. It's a wonderful question. So there's definitely a need for strengthening the global architecture, global institutions, or governance for that matter. So what could be the way forward? First thing, yes, there's a trust deficit, but I think the kind of changes or reforms I would like to suggest would include inclusivity. There has to, the institutions have to be more inclusive. They have to be more multilateral, though they are multilateral in terms of their membership, but they have not really been multilateral in terms of decision making. So that is one thing which these global governance institutions are suffering from. There is also one thing I've observed, the problem with the existing global governance institutions, that they suffer with this mentality of Cold War politics or Cold War thinking. They have to come out of that. They have to acknowledge the changes. They have to acknowledge the changes taking place across the world, including in South America, in Asia for that matter. The world is no more led by a couple of countries only. So these changes have to be acknowledged by the existing leading powers in the world. Here I would like to cite one example of NPT, as I have worked on NPT for quite a long time. There's one process within NPT that is called NPT review conferences. These review conferences take place every 5 years. And they invite members even which are not signatories to NPT, for instance, India or Israel. These countries are not signatories to NPT. Review conferences are held with a perspective to include changes or demands from these different countries and how far NPT has been able to achieve. Here we have seen that review conferences have been sort of a coffee shop type of event for a very long time, for many decades. Many countries, including India, Israel even, for that matter, have raised this issue of making it more inclusive, despite many resolutions coming from these countries, the so-called outlier countries, the non-signatories of NPT. Not much has been done when we look at the review conferences. All the countries come up with very, very long documents, and they just discuss it over a couple of days. And in the final, like the final event, after a couple of days, they reach a sort of a consensus whereby they agree on a couple of things. But however, if we notice, out of the last 9 review conferences, we have not really reached even the consensus report for many, at least 4 review conferences. So it shows that there is definitely a lack of platform for these countries to speak up. Only a couple of powers, emerging powers come and speak. And if there is also one debate on disarmament versus non-proliferation. Many a times, these leading countries, the P5 countries or the N5, the nuclear 5 countries of the world, they overemphasize on non-proliferation aim of NPT. However, they forget many a times that NPT also talk about disarmament. How much these 5 countries been able to achieve when it comes to disarmament? Not much. When it comes, China for a very long time was pushing for disarmament before it joined NPT in 1992. But what happened after that? Since like last couple of years, China has been putting the blame on the US for that matter, to go first with disarmament, only then China will follow the suit. Is this the right approach? So there is definitely a lack of commitment even for the existing processes or existing platform which exist on this international governance, let alone reforming these institutions. So first way to go ahead with it is definitely reform the process, reform the documents. Those documents were formed in Cold War period, so we have to come out of that. We have to acknowledge and accept the changes that have been taking around the world. So yeah, that is my response to Mr. Joshi's question. For second question from Shraddha, I believe on China's claim in Bhutan, I think Dr. Jabin has yet to make comments, so I think he will be the right person as he has been working on the border for quite a long time. I think that is fine, right?
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Dr. Jabin, can you make your response to the question?
Okay, let me then quickly start with Ms. Shraddha Boite's question on Bhutan. See, the Chinese also have an active boundary dispute with the Bhutanese. And the fact that the Bhutanese dispute has not been resolved is because, informally at least, the arrangement between India and Bhutan is that it will not be resolved until the entire India-China boundary dispute is resolved. So, in any case, the two boundaries are linked. And China also doesn't have a formal diplomatic relationship with Bhutan, despite Bhutan being a neighboring country of China. And the Chinese blame the Indians for this pressure on Bhutan not to develop bilateral ties directly with China. Bhutan also doesn't have bilateral ties with any of the other four permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. And Doklam, it was an incident in which the Chinese tried to put pressure on Bhutan, but the Indians intervened. And now this is another case in point. In fact, with this particular Sakata wildlife sanctuary, this has never been included in any maps of China so far. So this is a new claim altogether. And so which means that Chinese are simply playing true to form and putting in expansive claims to put pressure on Bhutan, and by putting pressure on Bhutan, also to put pressure on India-Bhutan relations. So I think that's the objective here. And of course, they want to put pressure militarily, obviously, also on Arunachal, because this is an area that borders Arunachal, the Tawang tract. So in that sense, yes, it's all connected. To the question on China-Russia relations, I think this is an important question. And it's an area that we need to be paying a little more closer attention to, especially since India seeks to balance pressure from the United States through its relationship with Russia. And if you notice, right after the clashes broke out, Rajnath Singh made his first visit to Moscow, because Moscow remains our biggest supplier of arms and ammunition for all of our armed services. Now, the China-Russia relationship is extremely complex. It's very, very finely balanced, very carefully balanced. It is a relationship of extremely transactional nature. The Russians, I mentioned before, that 90% of China's weapons practically are made in China itself. But for the other high-end, very technologically superior weapons and technologies, they actually depend on the Russians. So the Russians, in a sense, are selling weapons to both the Chinese and to Indians. And that is also a problem for us. But fundamentally, what brings them together is the Western pressure on Russia because of the Crimea-Ukraine situation. And that has driven Russia into China's arms. And both countries have a fundamentally anti-West, anti-United States position, so that also allows them to come together. But there are a lot of traditional suspicions between the Russians and the Chinese. Even during COVID, some of those tensions were visible. And the Chinese have learned something from the Russians, like electoral interference was mentioned. The Chinese have learned to, I think, you will see the next elections in the United States at the end of this year. You will find both the Russians and the Chinese getting involved in it for sure. So yeah, essentially this is an anti-West reason why they are coming together, but it's an extremely transactional relationship. If the West were to improve ties with Russia, we might see the Russians have a greater leeway with respect to their dealings with China. They would not be doing so much with the Chinese if they weren't under pressure from the West otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jabin. Now we move on to the valedictory address of this particular conference or webinar. I would like to invite my very dear friend Arvind, who is a very well-known scholar in China. So these two, I mean, anybody who is working on China should listen to Jabin and Arvind. Okay, they really have very different perspectives. To introduce Dr. Arvind, I'm more than anything else, I think a dear friend, okay, who did his post-graduation from our own Pune University. Okay, followed by that, Dr. Arvind Yellere is currently working as a senior research fellow, that is an associate professor at the HSBC Business School at Peking University. Before joining the Peking University, Dr. Yellere was associated with the Institute of Chinese Studies in the capacity of associate fellow and assistant director. Previously, he was also associated with the Shanghai GQ, that is, European Commerce Limited, as a senior corporate consultant for research. During this spell, he helped the corporate world in China to understand the dynamics of Asia, Asia Pacific, competitive market studies in South Asia, and of course the Indian economy and its market and its markets. So far, Dr. Yellere has spent about 10 years residing in China, handling different responsibilities and contributing to the field of academics as well as corporate research. He holds a PhD in Chinese Studies from the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Contributed opinions, views, to leading global media. Arvind has been a speaker, panelist, moderator, and chair at conference in India and abroad. Apart from all this formal introduction, I mean, Dr. Arvind was also instrumental in bringing in, China studies in Maharashtra. In fact, we toured to Kolhapur University. We had few sessions in the University of Mumbai also, and we also created this particular group called as ICS Maharashtra, where we wanted to bring in Chinese studies into Maharashtra. And it is only because of these two people that we find two scholars of University of Mumbai today having, got the advantage to study in different universities, like both Sadia as well as Sumed Lokhande. So a lot of it has gone in Maharashtra in last 2 to 3 years by both Dr. Arvind and Dr. Jabin. Now, all are eager to listen to you, Dr. Arvind. So over to you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mridul. If I can say that, thank you, Professor Nide, for inviting me.
Please. Mridul sounds always better.
Okay, yeah. Mridul is very soft, so I think I would always use I've been always having a soft corner to those Maharashtrians who have been trying to forge or to study Chinese studies. So, so you have been always softer and you'll be always the one beloved for everyone. So let me start, first of all, thanking the BNN College. This is a great initiative. I must thank the patrons and organizing committee to even thinking of a subject like India and China, or bringing China away from main Mumbai to Bhiwandi, new Mumbai area, which is quite an interesting way of interacting and sharing our thoughts. We are experts in the making, at least I can say that about me. I do study about economics and other things, but there are many things even I don't know, and I've been interacting with my fellow colleagues and friends outside Delhi, like the dearest Professor Nide. They have been instrumental in taking China studies out of Delhi. So I must congratulate BNN College for that, patron and organizing committee, especially the principal, Dr. Wag, and without forgetting Professor Rasal's name, who has been, following this up for past 2 weeks. I've been troubling him a lot about many things, and then he literally did not run away and delivered his promise, and here we are. So this is a new trend. Webinar nobody anticipated webinar a few months back, 4 to 5 months back. Even I wouldn't have thought of participating in a webinar and thought that it's very untasteful, why to go to webinar and talk about it. But here we are. We cannot escape realities. In January, when I came back to India on a winter vacation, the social distancing was already in place. People were denying to meet me. They were not meeting me. They thought I was carrying corona in my bag and going all around. So I had that feeling. And I was guessing, what happens if literally corona lands in India, and what will happen? So we are seeing different repercussions, different impact factors unfolding. creating acute situations for federal government in India. It's not only about the central government, but also about the state governments and the municipal and other local government bodies in India. So to put that perspective in a presentation, it is a little difficult, but what I would try to cover over here in next 15 to 20 minutes is what has really changed, or what is changing as far as India-China relations are concerned from economic perspectives. I mean, Jabin has spoken about how the things are evolving and how we need to be quite inquisitive from different aspects about India-China relations. My co-panelists, Renu, Sadia, and Sumit have also put in some aspects into the investigation. So I would not try to repeat those, but try to speak something which has been in the making. And now I want to start with the question which Dr. Joshi has put down, saying that if there was so much of damage being made to Indo-China relations, why weren't we aware of it? Or did that damage noticeable in earlier cases? I would say that India's engagement with China, I mean, whether that is economical, political, has been always impacted with inconsistencies because we have very limited capacity in China. Those who know China, those are, and some are even seasonal experts who come and speak about China. And then the ground realities differ a lot. And the basic reason why I like to be a part of these webinars, which are away from Delhi, because there is more promise on China studies in non-Delhi groups or away from Delhi. So interesting thing what has happened and what is going to happen as far as the economic scenario is concerned between India and China. I would like to talk about in two different parts. One would be how the Chinese have been facing the heat, not only from January, but even before that, and how that is going to create more regressive approaches by China. So I will talk about how the Chinese are trying to override the multilateral financial institutions, try to create its own influence. Secondly, I would talk how the COVID had changed the internal dynamics in China. Whether the Chinese economy tries to see same kind of opportunities and challenges which were there before COVID-19 came into the picture. Thirdly, I want to talk about few economic drivers, and these drivers have been new. These drivers have been recently coming into the picture and have been playing quite an important role in influencing China's economic statecraft. And the second part of my presentation or my talk will be about how all this COVID-19 trade war is impacting the relationship between India and China, where I'll talk about Alibaba and 59 chores. You know, we have this famous story, so I'll take that connotation over here. So then we have a problem with Huawei, and then India finds reliance in Reliance. So how that thing happened and how that thing is really changing the complete dynamics. Secondly, I would talk about the balance of trade, because there has been a lot of discussion about can India live without China? Can India decouple from its dependencies over China? I mean, this is a big topic, but I'll try to bring it out quite frankly. So let me start with pre-COVID. If you remember till 2007, and Mridul, if you can just tell me if I'm trying to take more time, okay? Just tell me, I will try to brief. From 2007 to 2013, a lot of things have changed as far as Chinese economy is concerned. The Chinese economy was the one which ended up a colossal, phenomenal growth rate about 13.1%, 13.7%, the two different growth rates for the same year calculated by the Chinese. That was the year 2007. 2007 was the same year, the last quarter, that is September, October, November, and December 2007, when the Chinese growth started dropping, and it has not stopped since then. 2007 is also a good phenomenal year for China because 2007, in its National People's Congress, the Xi Jinping comes quite forward. He becomes a part of Politburo committee, and he starts watching how China is going back, how the recession is affecting, and what we see, the regressive policies, a policy of geoeconomic strategy making in the form of BRI, actually has its roots since year 2007. So from 2007 to 2013, a lot of time is invested into making policies where China spends a lot of time, if not China, Xi Jinping spent a lot of time thinking, how he can achieve these goals back. He thinks about China's dream. He thinks about Chinese dream. So then the BRI happens, and from 2013 to 2019 December, to be very specific. I don't want to go to the date, like December 5, December 6, but yes, till 2019. For China, all the good, despite some problems about the accusations about debt piling up, accusations about overspending, accusation about how some of the private companies are overstepping, causing capital flight, and so on and so forth. But Chinese were assured that whatever investment they're making globally in the form of BRI, things would turn out positive over the period of 10 years. But the question which was asked when the first case of coronavirus was found in Wuhan was still asked about China's influence or China's intentions behind BRI. I mean, Chinese were talking about protectionism, how US is causing impact on globalization. But the important question every one of us need to ask, once on the one hand, when China was talking about protectionism, through BRI, wasn't it trying to introduce a new kind of protectionism? This protectionism was certainly different, was not explicit, but certainly it has some implicit forms, because China was thinking to go out, influence markets, take over production units, and take over companies of importance. So China was trying to introduce a new kind of protectionism by going outside. So very few of us don't understand these dynamics, and these dynamics are quite important to understand how things changed in the first half of the 2020 of this year. So what has happened after COVID? Even the processes, the plans which were planned by the Chinese leaders have stopped. Somebody, if I remember, it was principal who was talking about everything has come to standstill. It's a good word. And for Chinese, there is no way out now, because if you remember, if your clout, your influence is decreasing, and you want to make an impact, so you have to put in double efforts. You have to put in 2x efforts. The efforts which will try to level up with the damage which has created, and then the second level of impact which will take your impact factor above the level of 0. So China has been struggling to make more space, and China has been struggling to make that space when BRI was failing, and when COVID happens now, you can imagine a kind of emergencies China has been facing with. Especially last 3 years, China has been spending a lot of its R&D on science and technologies, new enterprises, new technologies, AI interventions, and so on and so forth. So once the COVID is in the picture, the situation becomes quite grim for China, and that has a direct impact on its external ambitions, what those ambitions could be, and how that thing is going to impact. Let me take a few examples over here. One good example would be WTO, and every one of us is very well aware of WTO, very well aware about the complexities involved with that, as far as the trade tariffs, restrictions are concerned. One thing which we always forget is that China has been friend with India with benefits as far as WTO is concerned. Most of you would be surprised to know that the BRICS at one point of time, along with its friends from South-South cooperation, proposed that the China's voting share in WTO tribunal should be increased by 7%. So it was deliberate process which China has been doing since last 1 decade and so to use India's soft power positions or India's qualities in multilateral positions to benefit itself. Well, if you think WTO has been discussed a lot, Arvind give us another example. We have another example. Monetary Fund. International Monetary Fund is another thing. If you remember, in 2016, renminbi, the China's national currency, became a part of spatial drawing rights. Okay, it's called SDR baskets. It's a very executive club. It's a kitty party within developed countries where these five countries would try to create a parallel system to survive through volatilities, right? It really doesn't affect the other countries. But interestingly, we are in an economic system, in a global economic financial system, where we want all these five economies to survive, right? US, China, Japan, EU, and China. If anything goes wrong with these five economies, the rest of the global financial system goes on ventilator, right? So that's the situation. And in 2016, China made efforts to convince India to vote in favor of China to become IMF's SDR basket currencies. So that basket of currencies, as I said, really does not help everyone in the world. It is an exclusive club, and they have share swapping, they have trade swapping, they have reserve swapping concept which exists between these five economies. So India has been used for that. Well, now you would say that, okay, forget about WTO, IMF. Can you give more examples, more recent examples? Okay, we have example of NDB. India has been quite fascinated to have Father Day baby with China called New Development Bank, and say that, okay, it was India who was telling China, and it was Indian who headed the NDB. So it was in a lot of celebration and a proud moment. We tell everyone that we have this NDB. But interestingly, though every five country of BRICS share equal amount of capital out of $100 billion. I mean, the share is same. The voting rights are also same. But when the talk about the contingency currency pool was started playing out, remember, even if all these five countries have 20% share in voting, as well as NDB is concerned, China dominates the contingency currency pool, which is quite an important, especially Russia's, Brazil's, South Africa, and China, and even India's growth rate is gyrating down. So now everybody is looking upon those contingency currency pool, which China has assured of 41% of share. So we have already surrendered, we have already subscribed to a mechanism or plan where China dominates. So we don't have a way out from this. Now, interestingly, let me take one more example over here. How India has been giving up more space for China at multilateral financial institutions. You must have heard about SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, right? In 2016, we applied. In 2017, we become a full member. China has been talking about cooperation between the Silk Fund. Silk Fund is sovereign funds China started to create to support the Silk Road projects. So China proposed to SCO that why not we have Silk Road, Silk Fund plus the Shanghai Cooperation Organization banks coming together, consortium of banks coming together and form a kind of funding mechanism where we can fund projects. Actually, when Silk Road proposed it, everybody could guess, what is the structure, what is the motive of it. But then India had to agree to it. From Indian side, we don't have nationalized bank representing India, but we have so-called India Infrastructure Finance Committee, Finance Company Limited, which is pretty small, which holds about I think $800 million. In rupees, it has a bank balance of about 53 billion rupees. It's a very small thing compared to the big financial giants over here. From Chinese side, CDB, China Development Bank, is a part of the consortium, which has the asset size of $2 trillion. And India GDP is 2.8. I mean, just to put the numbers into perspective. And then you would see that at multilateral financial institutions, China was winning. China was convincing India to support China, and India was giving the support. Now, it was pre-COVID, during COVID. Post-COVID, I don't see any change in this spectrum of policies. This will continue because we have already subscribed to that, and that will be will come out more forcefully. Moving to the second important area, what is happening in China right now? There are 4 important stages one needs to understand through which the Chinese economy has graduated. Okay, it has become mature. In 80s, China was all after acquiring natural resources globally. Then it became quite aware that it's not only the balance, it is not only the natural resources it should look for, but it should also import technologies and build its own brands. At third stage, China thought that, well, it's enough. Now we have huge middle class, and the brands like Haier, TCL are pretty doing well. Now why don't we go outside? So we have this second generation Chinese brands which were quite expert in technologies, R&D, started venturing out. And the present stage is, remember, I just want to name those 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, acquire natural resources. 2, import technology and brands. 3, win at home and export the Chinese brand. And number 4, most importantly, go acquire and win. Because Chinese have been aggressively following up this going out policy, by relaxing the funds to be invested abroad, relaxing the restrictions which are put on the Chinese companies to take the funds outside and to invest in foreign companies, to acquire the companies. They went on acquiring everything. They acquired theaters, they acquired film divisions, they acquired film studios in the United States. Only Chinese know what they were doing. But anyway, that was the State Council's affair. So they went on acquiring it, and they were trying to say that, okay, they are changing the global landscape now. Okay, they're trying to win world by investing it. So that's a major thing which has been seen in China's approach, and that is been taking place in post-COVID timeline as well. Third important fact is that China has stopped worrying about equitable distribution of income, horizontally through geographies and vertically through sectors. It is more worried how it can build value-intensive industries, no matter whether in coast or inlands. China has stopped worrying about it now. In China, they're focusing more on urban aggregating the value-intensive industries. So they have this Beikuang, Shangsheng. So Shangsheng, that means Beijing, Guangzhou, Shanghai, and Shenzhen. These are the 4 cities which have been pioneer of China's next course of development. The state council, the provincial governments are giving extraordinary importance to the policies which would influence the development of these four cities. And to your surprise, the GDP of Beijing, Guangzhou, Shanghai, and Shenzhen is more than Hong Kong's. Okay, the Shenzhen tops. Shenzhen is right across Hong Kong. It tops, and it is doing pretty well because those high-tech industries, value-added industries, tech-intensive industries used to go to Hong Kong, now are staying back in Shenzhen and trying to create so-called a greater Bay Area where Guangdong, Hong Kong, and Macau will be creating a new triangle to create a new growth engine for the Chinese growth. Okay, now coming back, when all these things are happening, BRI will be intensified, though there are some problems with implementing it. There are rough figures that the total investment, both sides, from the Chinese as well as from the whole side, could go anywhere between 8 to 10 trillion US dollars by 2035. And that would give you an impression, a scale at which China would like to pursue it at any cost. Now, coming back to the bilateral relations, how these things are going to impact India. I have spoken already about how India unknowingly or maybe naively given up our vantage points to China. WTO, IMF, SCO. I can name many of them, but we have to have 3-4 another validated lectures for that. I don't want to get into that. But I just give you an impression, how we lost space, and there is no way we can keep just focusing on bilateral. Bilateral trade overall is about $95 billion. It's compared to this big statecraft which we are talking about, economic statecraft we're talking about, and the bilateral trade. And if we are just focusing on bilateral trade, I think we are losing our focus on the about the broader game. Okay, so we have to have our own ways. If I want to be little choosy in words, we have to have our own strategies. Again, which will outsmart Chinese. But so far the damage has been done. So I want to speak specifically about two things over here. One, technology. Sumit was speaking about the pharma industries. Yes, we have been importing the APIs, the raw material which we need for pharma industries in India. And interestingly, 85% of that API we used to export outside. So you need to understand the dynamics behind it. We need API, not only for the domestic consumption, but we need it to value add and then export it. So it plays quite an important role at two levels. One, the pharma industries, domestic, to provide medicines, affordable medicines at affordable cost to the Indian population. And secondly, to earn dollars, money. In Marathi, I remember we have a saying, "Paishaचा सोंग घेता येत नाही." It's same thing somewhere here. Though we want API, we keep talking about API, domestic industries, but that APIs have been quite instrumental in adding money into our reserves, because that gives us good hold over the market abroad. Now, the important thing over here, when these things are happening, when we are building up our dependencies over China, is it possible to pursue a decoupling? And to one line of answer is that it is possible. So yes, you can celebrate on that line. But the question is, what is a lifeline? What is the timeline for following that decoupling? And to me, to tell you very frankly, because I'm an academician, not a politician, I don't want to fool you around. It needs a substantial amount of investment in terms of years. I'm not talking about money. About 15 years of it, because there are few things which India wanted to copy from China. India was in a hurry. but that was a wrong decision. I mean, I would give you one example of electric vehicles, EVs. EV was born in difficult times, and it was conceived in difficult times. Basically, when we have poor infrastructure, we were just trying to follow what Chinese did, and then we have our doorsteps about 20 big Chinese companies selling the technologies, and then we didn't have any ways because the policies were made, the processes weren't put in place, so we had to think about how we could better implement the EV policy making. So when I say 15 years of timeline, it is quite a strict timeline, and keeping the complexities of decision making in India and various underpinnings, I would say that it will take time, but it's possible to decouple from the Chinese economy. Okay, that's number one. Second thing is quite important. What will happen to those companies? Okay, we have this Alibaba and Charlie Shore, but we have now Huawei and Sark Shore. What will happen to them? No, I don't want to call it. I don't want to put in, the words of Trump, that they're outrightly wrong, or they haven't been considering the prospects over here. The Indian IT ministry sent its officials to Huawei's office. Huawei went to Bangalore a couple of times. So the bohemi between Huawei and India was going on for past 6 to 7 years, and suddenly the Indian government found it's not going to benefit it. The so-called intrusion of Chinese technology companies into Indian economic space has been quite worried. And at number of times, the researchers and experts have been pointing it out that over-dependence or easy buying from Chinese, Huawei is only one case, would not really help India in the long run. So in the post-COVID, the major challenges would be how India is going to deal with these challenges. I mean, you would know that, even few companies in India have the Chinese investors. For example, there is a Chinese state-owned enterprise called in hotel group called Xinjiang Hotels. Xinjiang Hotels is a big group, but they are investing into Hyatt groups, if I'm not wrong, or Intercontinental. Which have about 3 to 4 dozens of hotels across India. So, which will tell them the different dynamics, consumer behavior, and other things. So it is not only about the Huawei. This is a major question. Huawei is just one symptom, but there are other aspects which have been, sidelined, which have not been taken into consideration. Now, coming back to the important point, whether or not India can have its own game plan to deal with China, we need to think it from a very holistic point of view over here. Because we cannot reduce the dependency rate on China overnight, and not in 1 or 2 years. And if we are not looking those issues constructively, whatever the efforts we make, which are cosmetic in nature, is not going to deliver any promise to us. For example, China has been giving a very handsome export rebate tax allowances or tax benefits to its exporters. I mean, in India's case, we do give, but it is not a phenomenon. It is not something which would help them. And beyond that, the rate of loans, the rate of interest the SMEs face is or creates some kind of asymmetric situation. I mean, on the one hand, Indian government says that, okay, we have these export promotion policies, but if you don't have the right fiscal policies to help the SMEs to grow, stand on their own and export, there is no point of having the export promotion policies. I mean, during COVID time, if I can take 1 extra minute on this thing. Finance Minister announces that SMEs can defer their loans. Yeah, perfectly fine. Or maybe they will be given new loans. But during the deferment or during the deferment period, they'll be still levied with the interest. That is happening everywhere. So the real problem of addressing the deficit is not about making export promotion policies, bringing manufacture here, talking manufacturing and floor shops over here, but small, minute things. These are small levers which can be fixed easily. But I think we sometimes get carried away with so much of China bashing, so much of big terms. So we get lost with the basic way of analyzing the problems on the ground. Now that brings me to the conclusion. I think I spoke a little longer. The policy would be, if we are trying to decouple, and if at multilateral financial institutions globally, China is not directly benefiting from China. So what kind of neighbor we are looking into China, right? I mean, we are not going to change it. I mean, I would say these lines which have been said so many times, the former Indian Prime Minister said this, Atal Vajpayee, we cannot change neighbors, but we can change friends. So China is going to be there ultimately, and India has to engage with it. What Jabin was also saying, that we cannot change it, but we need to learn to deal with it, to tackle with it in a new way. And I think as far as economics is concerned, China needs India more than India needs China. And I think that's a basic fundamental line everyone needs to know. We cannot change the dynamics within 2 and 3 years. We need to wait for it, but also at the same time, we need more inquisitive minds. We don't need very rocket science over here. Simple policies which may come from, not from Delhi, but which may come from Mumbai, which may come from Bangalore or Hyderabad. So I think there is all possibilities of India balancing its economic strategies vis-a-vis China. It has a pretty longer timeline, but yes, we have ways to deal with it, and I'm quite optimistic and hopeful that we will deal with it. I mean, if we learn from the mistakes which we made in the past. Thank you, brother. Thanks a lot.
Oh, thank you, Arvind. That's quite an optimistic, with a very optimistic note that we're ending here. I mean, though actually for both the keynote as well as valedictory, we don't have questions. But since people don't know much about China, if you can just engage in one or two questions. I think Chandramohan Joshi again has asked a question, sir. Do you think that there is enough space in the world to accommodate both rising India and China?
So to that answer, Dr. Joshi, I mean, the space is always limited. Okay, I mean, you look at the problem from with limitations, right? I mean, so you cannot change the boundaries, you cannot change the geographies. So in economics, what happens? You cannot change the capacity. You may print more notes or more currencies, but you cannot change the reality of buying, consumptions, and patterns of it, right? So there is limited scope. There is no expansion to change the scope. But what has happened is India has to make more scope by replacing or by displacing the Chinese. And what Chinese has been doing is, if I can put it into a vector, into an infograph, there are 3 levels of economic progress. Okay, so it's production, supplies, and value chains, right? So what happened incidentally, now Chinese have left manufacturing and they're just trying to climb up to the value chains. There is enough room for China to keep maneuvering during that value space. And what it would do is, it will do it successfully by displacing US. And that is what Mr. Trump is more worried about. That drives him crazy. But the China is trying to create more space in the supplies and value chain, and when it is not able to do that, incidentally it is it is trying to fall back to the manufacturing, and that's where I think it is in a dilemma. That is not only in a dilemma only in middle income group, but here also, it is not able to find the right recipe to climb above that value chain for the supplies. Because in Southeast Asia, though we talk about 30 million odd overseas, 30% of the Southeast Asian population are overseas Chinese, but the supply chains are controlled by the Americans, the Singaporeans. The Chinese don't have any say in that, and I think in the long run, also Chinese would find it very difficult to displace the Americans as far as the supply chains are concerned. So China finds it difficult to deal with these challenges as far as supply chains are concerned, value chains are concerned. And now, since there is no scope, it goes back to the manufacturing, where it doesn't want to leave away the control over some of the manufacturing which India wants to take over. For example, whether it is textile, whether it is labor, whether it is cement, whether it is steel. So there is no extra scope, but it is Chinese which do not understand that they have to climb upward and now downward to make space. And for India, even if we make more space in the manufacturing, globally manufacturing scenario, we make space in difference about 1%. It's a great deal for us. Now the question about made in India, and there are certain areas where made in India is not really being termed good or being termed prospective. We need to work on that. IT, yes, outsourcing about technologies is concerned, technological services are concerned, we are good in that. But if India wants to move into the space which China dominates still, do we have enough capacity, quality, endurance, sustainability to displace China? That's the question one needs to ask here.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Probably, this is one of the best discussions that we would have had since Galwan, or maybe we can go back and we can say since Corona. Okay, so many issues being covered today, and I think we had the best of scholars, okay, who work on China, and we have a different perspective altogether today for all those people who have joined here. And of course, I'm sure that this particular recording will also be shared with those people who are interested in this particular discussion. Basically, I should mention some of the other teachers who are present here in this particular program today, like be it Stephen Lobo sir, be it Nivrutti Kumbhar sir, be it Garje sir, Mansi, Kedari. There are a lot more people from the teaching faculty who have joined here today for this particular program. And I'm sure whatever we had decided at one point of time, that let there be some kind of discussion that should happen from Mumbai or from Maharashtra. Let this particular thing, take off with the help of this particular, So I feel that the best time to get the best out of it is when you have when your stakes are minimum. And I think at this point of time where everything is in lockdown situation, if suppose say we take some kind of leap, certainly this will reach to some kind of level, because there are people from Kashmir, I can see, there are people from Jalgaon who have joined, and I'm sure that there will be some kind of Maharashtra chapter in studying China. And of course, people like Jabin and Arvind are here to guide people in various universities. Unfortunately, there are some so-called experts on Indian on international relations who probably have been misleading the entire Maharashtra through all these news channels and all. And I'm sure that this particular perspective will certainly change our perspective towards the entire situation, and we have a very different kind of view of Indo-China relations post this particular thing. Thank you so much, all the speakers. I mean, all these speakers are personal friends, students, and it's because of them that this could happen. Now, over to Dr. Deshpande for further proceedings.
Thank you, sir. Now I take this opportunity to end this session by proposing vote of thanks. I extend my sincere thanks to Dr. Jabin Jacob, keynote speaker, our honorable speakers Sadia Rehman, Dr. Renu Rana, Dr. Sumit Lopande, and Dr. Arvind Yellere for their informative sessions, giving insight, a real insight of India-China relation. I thank Dr. Mridul Nire, who is the driving force behind this successful webinar. I extend special thanks to our President, Honorable Sri V.P. Jadhav, and Executive President, Honorable P.D. Kale, Padma Shri Anna Sahib Jadhav, Bharatiya Samaj Unnati Mandal, for their encouragement and support. We feel blessed to have the management like this. I thank our principal, Dr. Ashok Wagh, Professor Rasa, HOD, Political Science Department for their timely help and guidance. I thank Professor Rathod and Shivali sir for their technical and overall support. Above all, I want to thank all the participants whose presence made this program a grand success. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, all the participants. Feedback link will be available shortly on our Telegram group. You all have to request to please fill feedback form available on Telegram group. Within 7 days, you will get your certificate on the same Telegram group. So please do not leave the Telegram group before you get your certificate. Thank you.